Hi and welcome to another episode of Ecom at One. And today's guest is Thomas Vosper. Now, Thomas is the CEO and co-founder of Aisle3, a new e-commerce shopping marketplace here in the UK. How you doing, Thomas?
I'm really well. Thank you for asking, Richard. It's great to speak with you.
Isn't it just? Thomas, I've known for a couple of years now. We actually met at an expo. I think this seems to be quite a thread through quite a lot of our episodes where we meet amazing people in the e-commerce space. And then they become sort of partners and friends of the agency and friends of myself. And then we get them on the podcast. So Thomas has got some brilliant insight into a lot of different areas around e-commerce that we're going to be chatting about over the next sort of 45 minutes or so. But I think it'd be good just to kick off with, give the guys a bit of background, and really I think tie that in nicely with how you set a business up during on the start of lockdown of all times.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, I miss the meetings that we have at industry events. I think it's been one of the big parts of a working life that I've really missed over the last few months. Yeah. It's where I've probably spent most of my career, bumping into people like yourself, Richard, in agencies. I've been in e-com for about 14 years now. I started at Amazon back when there was about half a dozen of us on the UK marketplace team. Yeah. So as bizarre as it might seem, back when there was just toys and electronics and maybe baby products outside of the typical books and media. And so I survived 6.5 years there across the full suite of products that we now take as a bit of a given that exist on Amazon. I went to Tesco for a couple of years to try and build a marketplace on their Tesco Direct General Merchandise site. And then I spent the last 3 years at a price comparison site, was unfortunately made redundant about 2 weeks before lockdown. And that was probably the kick after my time working across corporate for all of these years to branch out on my own with an expert team around me.
Yeah, I think that's the obviously lots of things have come out of lockdown. A lot of people have had a lot of sort of transition from either one role to another, or having to, obviously certain people have had to close down their business and whatnot. And obviously that 2 weeks before lockdown, you were made redundant. But obviously in that time, and fast forward, what are we, sort of 8 months ago, I guess that is somewhere there. It's hard to even fathom what you've achieved from my point of view in the last 8 months. Obviously, an amazing journey this last 8 months. How crazy has it been actually setting up a business? What's that been like?
Yeah, it's been staggering, really, given the circumstances. I'm quite cognizant of the fact that I'm very lucky to work in an industry that's probably had the least impact around the global pandemic. If anything, as we see, and you'll probably see with your clients, e-commerce is booming for a lot of people. And that's quite hard to kind of stomach when there are so many individuals, particularly in hospitality, that are suffering so much at the moment. But at the same time, I think that my business in part probably exists and has grown at the pace it has because of the difficult circumstances. For a start, I think one of the challenges that I would have growing a business is the idea of finding people to come into an office. I live in Northwest London. I've been based in London for most of my working life, and that in itself is quite a challenge. And so hiring everyone remotely has been a really good opportunity for us as a business to expand our talent pool globally. And so I think it's maybe worth just attributing what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to solve at Aisle3. And that's why the reach is far and wide in terms of who we're hiring. Firstly, I want to solve two things in e-commerce I think are still broken. And I think although many people will look at the increase of the likes of Amazon and the increased sales for their clients, even during these times, I still think there's two fundamental things that are broken in e-commerce. One of them is the complete aggregation of products where there's more than one person selling a product. I think that shoppers should be able to always make an informed decision who they buy from and see all of their options so they can decide based on whatever's important to them, whether that's price, whether that's availability, locality, whether it's sustainability, or they have a particular preference or an affinity with a retailer. I want to make sure every purchase online is made by a shopper who's informed with all of their options.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second part, which traditional comparison sites also don't do a particularly good job of, is what do you do when it's a unique product and it's a unique retailer and you're bringing that to market?
Yeah.
How do shoppers even find those products?
New products, all those marks. Yeah.
Because unless you are throwing £60 million like Huel did at Facebook ads to get found, it's really hard to create that kind of hype and that kind of buzz and just get found by shoppers. And shoppers want to find new products, and retailers and brands want to be found more effectively. So that's why we created Aisle 3, and to solve those two issues. And that meant that I kind of had to extend a talent pool of people across the globe to help that technical challenge, because it's phenomenally difficult to take multiple products from retailers and show them all on one page, so that you as a shopper, if you're looking at a particular pair of trainers, don't need to click out onto multiple tabs to make sure you're getting the best deal.
Yeah.
Actually, what's also been really interesting though is, and the challenge as well, is we probably live in a bit of a bubble here, certainly in London, in terms of the impact of pandemic and lockdown. But once you expand your workforce globally, for example, our designer was in Denver, so was caught up in the Black Lives Matters riots. Okay. And there's conflict in Armenia, where our head of machine learning is based. Our UX guys in Belarus, which has gone through a lot of political turmoil, and the guys in India have been affected by flooding. So all of this is happening outside of a pandemic, right? It's crazy that there's so much difficulty for people all around the world.
Yeah, but it's sort of tech bringing us all together. So Aisle 3, obviously we'll come on to some of the specifics there, but obviously brand new business in March. Obviously now you've got a very experienced team on board, and sort of, I guess what we're saying is, the pandemic's helped us, or help you, should I say, to reach these people, to work as your team, and to get some real senior people on board, regardless of location. So that's sort of we're not office focused. I know obviously you come from a background of the big office, central London, that sort of background, but setting up a business and from zero, in effect, with a lot of people already. I know there's some interesting things that you've been working on around funding, getting that initial funding. And I think the people listening into the podcast, setting up a business, having an idea. Obviously, you've definitely had the benefit of the pandemic in terms of that e-commerce, massive rise of e-commerce, like the Phoenix. I was just looking at Shopify shares again. I mentioned them quite a lot on the podcast, but it's one I did jump on back in March, so that's done me quite well. But yes. E-commerce wise, it's obviously just crazy. But still, you're starting from scratch. In a market that is there's some big players in the market you're in. Getting that initial investment to invest in the people, the technology. Now, what's some of the things you've done, or some of the advice you could give from some of the learnings from that process?
Yes, so I suppose the biggest thing is that overnight success takes years. And although we've managed to grow a business rapidly, we've only been able to do that through the back of years of experience, of years of networks, connecting at events with partners, and mutual partnerships over a long period of time. And so everything that we've done over the last few months has been a culmination of that, and also a very clear vision that we could articulate right at the start, that we found that we could see as an investable business. We could talk to our network and our friends and family, who are shoppers like the rest of us, and it's a shopper problem we're trying to solve. And they could see that what we were trying to do by combining all of the products and offers in the world into one platform was valuable. And so that was probably all we needed to take the leap of faith to actually fund the business and bootstrap the business before we even talked about external funding. So I think, there are probably a couple of different circumstances that people see when they start a business. One is that they've prepared for years and they've maybe saved up some money, or they've taken a loan out against their house, or they've maybe got some friends or family to support them. Obviously, coming off the back of redundancy, an unexpected sudden redundancy, we didn't have the luxury of that. So I was very lucky to get support from Virgin Startups. They provide unsecured startup loans. It's effectively a personal loan to get the business up and running. So we funded the business with £50,000 worth of startup loans, and used that to very quickly compile a team and a strategy that would be an investable vehicle for industry specialists to invest in and support.
Yeah.
So it very much took a great deal of stress and a leap of faith to take on that personal debt, to take on this challenge.
Yeah.
And over the last 8.5 months, I've probably seen countless success stories of fundraising and growth on LinkedIn and social media. And you don't always see that, you know, that's only one of the 100, right? The other 99 failed.
You've seen how easy it is on the social media version. Like everything in life.
And it all looks incredibly easy, and of course it's not, and it's even more so once you start going out to external investors, because you know, firstly, you need to work very hard to refine your pitch. You need to be very honest when you don't know the answer, and be able to what I kind of refer to a bit of a boxer's feint. Sometimes you'll get asked the question that they probably know the answer to, and it's more to see how you answer it than the actual answer you deliver. You know, I see all of those things that happen, but ultimately you need to make sure that you've got the team, and I've been very lucky to have a team around me who could back my vision and, more importantly, execute on it.
So you got the whole sort of ups and downs of investment from you know, I've had a couple of people on the pod who've obviously gone into various sort of localized sort of angel networks, and as you've said, the Virgin specific, but ultimately, you know, you're getting in front of people, and it's just, you know, you've got to be ultimately, you've got to be prepared, have that strong confidence, but a very well thought out business plan that, you know what you're talking about. But obviously, when they do ask you something, which they may well do, which is the reality, because that's why they're, you know, they have various interests and whatnot, they'll ask you something that you may not know. Just being honest and open and looking for those traits in people to invest in, rather than maybe a bit, you know, making stuff up that's genuinely not the case. I think we're having a flyover at the moment. I live 3-4 miles away from where the Red Arrows are based, so it can be fun sometimes. I don't know if we caught that or not.
Yes, it's probably sometimes that's good. But I think the thing that's often people lose sight of in funding is it is actually real money. And it is real people's money, and particularly at the level of an early stage business. You're asking people to back your vision, you as an individual and you as a team, to execute that vision. And so it's very easy to lose sight of, we raised X million from a fund that people haven't heard about in a country we've never been to. But actually, you know, at the very early stage in raising money, you're asking people to back you and buy your vision and understand the problem that you're trying to solve, and also have faith that you can solve it.
Because it's not, So great work. So obviously you've been in the industry a long time. Well, fairly long. I don't like to say to make you sound 60 or anything, but
maybe you sound old. That's fine. The last 8.5 months, as exhilarating as they've been, have also aged me considerably. 20 hours a day for 7 days a week for 8.5 months does that. That's also the untold story of founding your own business.
First time, isn't it, since we actually had a face-to-face meeting in a coffee shop in Lincoln on the first week of March, or last week of February, somewhere there, wasn't it? And then literally like 2 weeks later, we're in lockdown and you're setting up a business. So it's quite a first time we've seen each other on camera like this, isn't it? Or face to face, if you like. Obviously, we've spoken many times, but we've not had a call on Zoom, etc. So obviously seen a lot of things over these years. Obviously, very early days at Amazon, and so obviously seen the progression of that. But what are some of the trends you're seeing at the moment? What are some of the trends that people should be looking out for in e-commerce?
Yeah, well, the classic cop-out answer to that is that online is growing, right? I mean, we saw that everything has been growing as people have been moving away from the high street because they haven't been able to go to the high street. And yet, despite the uncertain times, people were still spending online. And then the government took what was probably going to be the biggest Q4 online by some country mile anyway, and put a month's worth of closing the high street to pour more fuel onto that online fire.
Yeah.
And for the time of us having this discussion on a Tuesday after Black Friday weekend and Cyber Monday, when probably every single advertiser and agency and technology partner has been running around like they're on fire, really, which is probably tactless analogy after the F1 this weekend as well. It's been an absolutely chaotic weekend for people. So I think just sort of taking a step back, some of the trends I've seen happen more generally have probably been some of the similar trends that you saw maybe coming out of the financial crisis. I think that, it's quite easy to look at the number of boxes coming into your house and thinking that Amazon is going to be the big winner in this. I think that they almost certainly are going to be the big winner in this. But whilst a lot of agencies and advertisers panicked a little bit and stopped their spend in the first lockdown, I think the businesses that have really accelerated their growth have been the ones that have continued to spend. And I realise that's quite tough. There are a bunch of variables and circumstances that stop people from spending, but that kind of speaks true to what happened during the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, when the businesses that maintained or even increased their advertising spend were the ones that made significantly rapid gains and inroads to their growth.
Yeah, so the ones that leaned into the opportunity is what we're saying. Of this extra growth rather than which obviously I think it's just been smart with it, isn't it? Is what we're saying, because it's all right to say, right, well, double your spend. Well, hang on a minute. There's obviously there's areas of the business when we're talking about any e-com store that will be, most of them, it's going to have great opportunity, but at the same time, they've got to change a few things because certain products are no longer needed, or if it's more of a localized element, then you've got to completely pivot, but then lean into that pivot rather than keep doing what you were doing if that thing is not really, proper e-com sort of thing. So
yes, I think growing sales is not always the right thing to do when you can't fulfill at the other side, right? Because of, again, maybe there's restrictions because of how you're running your warehouse due to the pandemic. Again, there's a whole bunch of variables that would stop you from wanting to grow your sales. But it was actually a term coined during the financial crisis called the lipstick effect. And that was where what you would expect to happen is that shoppers started to become savvier and started to look for bargains. Whereas actually what happened was they gravitated more towards the brands that they knew and they trusted. So they were gravitating more towards the L'Oreal's. And so that's where the coin lipstick effect comes from. And I wonder if in part probably what's happened over the last few months is people have gravitated towards Amazon, not because we all inherently love Amazon. I would say we probably inherently dislike Amazon, but we know that it definitely fulfills the orders. Yeah. And so we pay a premium for that because of the convenience and the reliability.
It's so true, isn't it? I think it's that. Exactly that. It's they've got this bit where it's just so convenient and so reliable. I think, as my opinion, that it's just so damn easy, isn't it? And that's the trick. We know it's not the cheapest. It's no longer about that. It's just that convenience, reliability, ease, speed. 10 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock in the morning, it's here. And I don't know what the firms do that, but then you've got to log in and set those accounts up. So we'll talk about Amazon more, I think, as we progress through this. So few takeaways there, but I think what I'm keen to understand, obviously these retail trends, and we're going back to this sort of marketplace and sort of aisle 3, and CSS is something I would love to talk to you about. So CSS, it'd be good to explain to the listeners what a CSS is, and why I believe, and you believe, I'm certain, that every retailer should be on a CSS.
Yeah, and this speaks true to the trends that we're seeing for retail. You mentioned Shopify earlier, right? We know that marketplace advertisers are now looking at starting their own sites. It's never been easier to do that. And so going into new sales channels, Google Shopping is absolutely something as an e-commerce business you need to be looking at.
Yeah.
Just to kind of frame a bit of history around CSS, about 3.5 years ago, if you'd have searched for a product on Google, you would have seen the carousel of ads or product listing ads, we call them PLAs, across the top of Google. And every single one of those ads was served by containing products that were in Google Shopping.
Yeah.
The EU Competition Commission upheld a series of complaints from comparison sites saying, actually, that's an unfair monopoly and we're buried somewhere into the listings. We should be on a level playing field.
Yeah.
And so that carousel was opened out to other comparison shopping sites. And Google Shopping was broken out as a separate comparison shopping site from Google, meaning that every CSS site is on a level playing field with Google Shopping, which quite frankly is nuts with a business that is 8.5 months old, and yet I'm able to personally, through my business, able to offer all of the functionality and products and services that a $1 trillion business is able to support Google Shopping. And so what's really interesting about that is that there are around about 90 what they call CSS partners. So these are guys that are big enough to support several advertisers across Europe. And they all have a very different mix of business models. Google Shopping takes a margin from the bid that an advertiser's charged. Other businesses are either tied to agencies, so have a retainer or some kind of management cost for running the spend so they can pass the discounts on to their clients. Others are technical partners or fee providers that, again, offer another paid service. But where I believe, aisle 3 sit in this is we're a genuine comparison shopping site, and that is our only reason for being, to create that site which is a destination for consumers and for shoppers. And so where I see that being really helpful is that I work with a whole bunch of advertisers direct, and more importantly via agencies, who can concentrate on the part of the business which is where they add value. I concentrate on the part of the business where I add value, and collectively 1 + 1 actually ends up equaling 3. And so I think that with a variety of business models out there, and with Google taking a margin, I would implore every agency and advertiser, with me or otherwise, to 100% be running your ads through a comparison shopping service that isn't Google Shopping.
So I think you need to let that sink in for a minute if you listen to the podcast, because at this point, you need to be checking your shopping ads. So you need to be going to Google. You will know if you're an advertiser, if you're using a CSS partner or not. But ultimately, when somebody searches for your product, you see the product image, you see the description, the short description, the price, and whether you've got any other variables set up like reviews and discounts and things like that. But underneath that, it will say by Google, or it will say by your CSS partner. So if you're not using, if it still says by Google, you're paying a premium for that click. You're paying a premium. Google say about 20%. There is no, we haven't got an exact proof of that amount, an exact amount, but it's circa 20%. There's a lot of different variables going on in any auction, so it's very hard to put an exact number on it. But it's definitely a percent that Google are charging. So by using a CSS partner, like Google Shopping is a CSS partner, you're getting that discount straight away. So that's something that is very easy to set up. In terms of working with a partner, and we work directly with Thomas of all of our clients. It's something we give all of our clients at Ecom One. They get access to our free CSS partnership, a CSS platform. So it's a bit of it's a freebie in effect out there that is out there to to make sure that you're making the most of this I guess this legal piece that happened about 3 years ago now, to make the playing field, level the playing field in Google Index for products, which has been great. We've seen some huge, we've got some huge case studies on that around people switching over. And I think what happens is quite often people are a bit scared. Oh, we're going to move from Google to something else. Well, it's Google. You can't move from Google. It's like, and it is. And I think what is surprising is how simple it is. How quick. And as we know, it can be moved over if you get it on the right day. It can be moved over in 10 minutes potentially, or half an hour, or maybe a couple of hours. It's quite surprising. I think when you tell people for the first time about it, it's a bit of a, hey, what? You can do what?
I think there's an element of good old-fashioned British skepticism when something seems to be too good to be true, and that's understandable. And I agree. It's often very hard to actually see what the discount. There's almost an expectation that I spent £100 and I should see a minus £20 somewhere on my invoice, and it doesn't work like that. But it's what I do know is fact is that Google Shopping does apply a margin, and any ads that run through aisle 3, we don't apply a margin. And I suppose for full transparency on this, the obvious question that I probably get asked more than anything is, what's in this for me? Yeah. And why do I effectively offer something that everyone else is trying to charge a little bit for through extra ancillary services that I choose to offer as free? And maybe this is the old hippie in me that comes out, but ultimately, I think that if I can continue focusing on my mission that's important for our business, which is building a consumer site for shoppers, and I can offer a value add to all of the people that can help me do that, which is the agencies that can help their clients' businesses grow independent of marketplaces and independent of the big tech businesses, then why would I not be a fan of supporting that and giving them a chance to put some more money back into their business elsewhere at a time when people are being furloughed or losing their jobs, or help them put that money back into their marketing spend so they can grow their business?
Yeah. So if you're not using CSS, we can't make it any clearer than that, I think. You need to be. That's our opinion. That's obviously our opinion. We're in the space, but we're in the e-commerce space, agency and sort of, partner of, literally between us, thousands of e-commerce stores. So something that I think, everybody should be on. I completely agree, Thomas, completely agree. We've been running CSS for probably close to 2 years. For our clients, and there is no downside. There is no, and again, we had to take that jump of putting our first client on, and then our second client on. I think, is this too good to be true? No. And then obviously 2 years later, almost, obviously we're still, every week putting clients on, moving them over from Google to you guys. So brilliant.
Yes, at the risk of sounding like I might talk about another partner, I'm afraid, Richard, just for confidence, I've over 20 agencies that I work with across CSS. So it's a no-brainer. It's the biggest win in performance marketing. You just need to have a conversation with your own agency and start working with one of the 90 CSS partners out there.
Yeah. There's plenty to go at. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So jumping back to Amazon for a minute, obviously their growth, is ridiculous. I think, the amount of clients we've got that obviously are also, using Amazon and eBay, but Amazon specifically and their own website is growing. And obviously as a company that uses Amazon, but Amazon as a whole just growing. What do you see as their threat? What could sort of topple them? What threats are there for them, would you say?
Yes, well, they certainly seem like a bit of an unstoppable juggernaut right now, particularly judging by my local delivery guy who's upgraded from a hatchback to a people carrier and just taking the seats out the back. He was particularly proud of that purchase the other day when I saw him. So there is certainly, we're all fueling that fire of that growth. But I think there's probably a couple of risks. We talked earlier about Amazon not being the cheapest. Our own research has shown that customers can save 33% on a typical basket value by just increasing their per view across a couple of additional independent retailers. And I think that also speaks to the fact that, consumers these days are also looking for more sustainability and, ethical purchases and supporting what's been quite a damaged high street. There's certainly a lot of independents out there that would benefit from our business. And actually, when you take the time to look at their offering, and you consider the fact that you probably don't need a same day or next day delivery, and actually a free delivery in 4 days is perfectly fine, then you can save some money and support an independent business. So I think there's a few things around changing consumer habits. I think the other side of that coin is maybe changing habits with the brands and the retailers. Not everyone is in the enviable position that Nike were in when they walked away from Amazon and decided to have a D2C business. But there are definitely, with the accessibility of Shopify, a very good case for advertisers to start to expand their view. I think everyone saw the risk, or certainly a lot of sellers saw the risk when the global pandemic hit us first time round, and Amazon stopped fulfilling FBA orders for their merchants and chose to prioritize their first party orders. And so I think that kind of groundswell of seller discontent could cause a problem.
There's been quite a bit of press, hasn't there? Well, TV. I didn't actually watch it last week. I think my wife was watching it last night. I'm probably on replay or something, but I'll catch up around the sort of Black Friday deals that when you check them, they're not really Black Friday deals, and the various discounts that aren't really discount. I mean, I don't know the detail, but it's definitely a thread of discontent out there, and I think that sustainability piece, that sort of using a independent, family-owned, localized, that piece is obviously on a lot more people's minds than ever now. So there's that leads me into my next question quite nicely, because obviously they're like a juggernaut, as you said. That's a brilliant analogy. But at the same time, there's opportunity from off the back of that, and you alluded to a few bits there, the things that people should be looking at doing to counter that. But what other opportunities do you see off the back of, if you were sort of going to use Amazon to then build a business from, or is there any sort of bits of advice you can give there?
Yeah, well, certainly. So we talked about Shopify. We talked about how accessible it is now for sellers to start to spin up their own site, and then if they don't have the capacity in-house to run additional channels and advertising channels, there are plenty of agencies that are very experienced in helping sellers make that leap. I think there's some really useful tools that have become available. I'm really interested to see what happens with what's called Surfaces across Google, which launched in the US in spring, and it rolled out to the UK and wider Europe around about the middle of October. This is effectively putting free Google shopping listings into the shopping environment. I mean, I would say, transparency, I've not been convinced about that so far, but I think it's certainly something that everyone should be exploring. They can
get through a trickle. I think the trickle is probably it's like having we've obviously got a bit of experience with that, but it's definitely worth ticking the box on.
It all comes down to getting closer to the customer, and it's something I feel really passionate about what we're trying to create at Aisle 3, right? We want to try and close, we are trying to provide that marketplace portal and that destination site where customers can come and see all of their options, but we want to do that collaboratively with brands and retailers so that they can get close to their customer, and they need to close that gap. And what I mean by closing that gap is, if you think about the last thing that you bought on Amazon, I won't embarrass you by asking what it is, but if you think of the last thing, or any listener thinks about the last thing they bought on Amazon, and then think for a minute, did they actually buy it from Amazon, or was it sold by a third-party seller?
3-meter power cable times 2.
Okay, and who sold that?
Obviously, I bought it off Amazon. Who it's from, I couldn't tell you.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. That's why you see, Nike distance themselves. That's why you see sellers try and set up their own businesses, because they've completely lost that connection then. And that's now, you're an Amazon customer. You could have bought that cable, could have come from a factory in China. It could have come from a high street electronics shop. It could have come from anywhere, and you have no idea. You just think it came from Amazon. And so I'm really passionate that when we build Marketplace 3.0, we need to close that gap so that when shoppers are in market and when they're looking for products or they're trying to discover new products, actually you can place the retailer and the brand in front of them at the right time so that it's a good joined up shopping experience. And we want them to interact with because that's the threat. That's where the threat is for Amazon, right? If it's not price, it's going to be based on the experience that an independent seller can offer and the value that they can offer off their own site. And that's perhaps where, and by the way, that's perhaps where the kind of consumer pressure comes from and the retailer pressure comes from. The bit that we can't kind of go too much into is that obviously we talked about the EU actioning, taking action against Google, which created CSS. They have, of course, they've opened up an investigation against Amazon, around their use of sensitive seller information and how all of a sudden they are a third of the world's batteries are sold by Amazon, or a third of the country's batteries are sold by Amazon, right? Which seems to be a strange coincidence. And, without being too down on it, in the midst of a possible global recession and Amazon starting to drop conversations into around the universal basic income at the same time they're reducing their workforce with robots, I wonder how long the EU can tolerate their clever tax schemes when Amazon have the GDP of a small country.
Okay. So I think there's a lot of takeaways there. If you're listening to this, and you obviously, quite typical for us. Majority of our, not majority, but a lot of our clients, and I think a lot of people that listen to the pod will be heavily reliant on Amazon. I had a conversation the other day. I've got another conversation with them later today, I think, where they're doing about $250,000 a month, I think, through Amazon, about 100 grand through eBay, but about 20 grand through their own website on a monthly basis. So they've got a great business, but they've got no control of that business. That is the way I see it, and they've got no control. And I know even with their own website, there's things that are out of their control, like the Google rankings and AdWords and stuff, but they've got so much more ownership when you've got, that a volume of sales coming through your own asset. You own that asset. That's the thing for me, that you own that asset. You can control a lot that goes on there. You're building a business where if you're building a business off the back of something else completely, they put their fees up 30%, which is not unknown, or 20%, or whatever that number is, or a category changes, or they decide to muscle in on your category and do their own set of products, which is very well known. That happens a lot. You're a bit screwed, aren't you? So I think.
Well, 12 years ago, where did you think most of Amazon's traffic came from? It came from search engines. And so they made a very conscious decision not to create a landlord for themselves in Google, and invested in the whole ecosystem that you have today. And, sellers have to be smart about that themselves.
So from my point of view, and I think we're on the same page here, you've got to invest in your own site, your own business, your own, actual store, and if that's getting your hands dirty with Shopify, with ads, with SEO, with social, and that piece, I think as the podcast owner, an agency owner and ex-store owner, I think, I'm super passionate about that. It's all right. These marketplaces are fantastic places to be on, but if you're 100% and that's all you've got, it's a lot less control. But obviously marketplaces are fantastic. I'm not saying they're not, and they're different places that you need to be listed. But do you see any sort of specific direction other marketplaces are going, or marketplaces are going at the moment? Anything you see happening that guys need to be aware of on the sort of marketplace side of things?
No, I think the biggest piece is just that what's going to happen when the EU starts looking at regulation for marketplace control right now, because they're just, I can't stress enough, marketplaces need to exist. I'm ultimately building one myself at aisle 3, but marketplaces need to exist as a proper two-sided platform that adds value to shoppers and it gives value back to retailers and brands. And at the moment, I just don't see that direction happening right now, by and large. There's certainly a number of niche marketplaces, number of niche businesses that are very, very specific, that fulfill a specific criteria and need. But the big tech guys are just continuing to squeeze all of the shoppers. So, it kind of comes on to what I think maybe some of the biggest mistakes are when you look at the direction of where marketplaces are going. Probably some of the biggest mistakes are people either are over reliant on a handful of channels where they could have the rug pulled under them very, very quickly, or maybe they are cognizant of the fact that they need to expand their sales channels, but they try and almost do too much. And when I look at personally the mistakes I've made over the last 8.5 months growing a business, where we need to make mistakes, we need to make lots of mistakes, and we need to make them very, very quickly. Yeah. But we also need to surround ourselves with people that can either help drag us outside of our comfort zone and support us, or they can just take care of it. They understand what the end is in mind, and they can take care of what needs to be achieved. And so I think probably the biggest mistakes I see is maybe those sellers that have a very big business on something that's a very slick operation like Amazon, and then try and step outside of that. They don't always surround themselves with the right sort of support that they need to take that next level of growing their business.
Yeah. No, fantastic. So I think we're going to have to draw things to a close. We've had some great chat there, but what I'm keen to understand is who you think is the ultimate guitar player. Now, we're both massive Prince fans, aren't we? We've had a few chats about Prince over the time that we've known each other. So who would you say? Prince, Eric Clapton?
Well, Prince is certainly is very, very underrated as a guitarist. I think, one of the things you asked me about trends, I think it's fascinating, the rise in sales for musical instruments and particularly guitars over the last few months. I mean, certainly we've seen like a rise in like fitness equipment and yoga mats, but the fact that if out of this pandemic we have a whole new audience of people learning to play guitar and flex their creative skills, I think that's a very big positive. I think like most things in my choice in books and films, it's varied and depends on the mood, but you can probably pick the classics of the Hendrixes. You go for probably Hendrix, Clapton, Prince. I would say that Stevie Ray Vaughan, Frank Zappa. And then if you wanted to come to a probably more modern era, it feels like a lifetime away when about 14 months ago, I was with 20,000 people at the O2 watching John Mayer play about a 15-minute version of Gravity, which was sensational.
So you're not just giving us one, man, you're giving us a whole range.
If we're talking about business, we're already talking about diversifying and making sure that there is a bunch of different things that you're working on at the same time. It's exactly the same with guitars and everything else.
Love it. So I like to finish every episode, Thomas, with a book recommendation. Any book that you would recommend to our listeners for them to read. It can be anything from a novel to a how-to guide to a mindset to whatever. There is no limit. There is doesn't have to be a how to build your e-commerce store book. But a very what's a recent book that you'd recommend, or a book you'd recommend?
I'm sure you'll plug your colleague Henry's book on Google Shopping. It's a fantastic read. I would say that I've really struggled this year actually for reading. I really enjoyed the commute. I had a nice 35-minute on the train every single day, so I knew that I could get over an hour reading, and I've really struggled to try and bring that into kind of working from home and the rest of my life. The book I've just finished is I reread The Four by Scott Galloway. That's a hugely interesting book about the inner workings of the big tech beasts and who might be challenging those guys. I think if for a quick fire list, like personally, I really enjoy Matthew Syed's Rebel Ideas. I'd recommend that. Factfulness,
You're doing it. You're doing it again. Then I asked for one book.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a few, right? And by the way, I recommend all of these. They should all be read. Simon Sinek's Start with Why, Carol Dweck's Mindset.
Yeah.
If you're really interested in getting into the weeds of marketplaces, things like Platform Revolution, The Inevitable, or The Death of the Gods are all they're quite intense reads, but very industry specific. If you like the story, then you can't do much wrong if you look at Shoe Dog or Chaos Monkeys.
Yeah, there's a lot of books on there that.
I'll give you your one though.
We are going in with one.
I'll give you your one that everyone's got to read, I think, and I think it still stands the test of time 40 years later, and that's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. I mean, there are, just as a philosophy in life, in business, in everything, I think even now, it almost all rings true. Yeah. And for anyone starting a business or looking at growing their business, the 4 kind of key takeaways for me are about being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, seeking first to understand before being understood, which I get wrong all the time, by the way, and then sharpening the saw.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, there is a whole plethora of book recommendations, but I think you mentioned about 5 books on there that are on my top as well, like Carol Dweck, Mindset. Anybody that starts and works in any of my companies, they get given a Carol Dweck Mindset book. It's one of the first things we give them in their welcome pack is the Mindset book, because we're a massive believer in that.
Fantastic.
So, Thomas, it's been a blast. We've been trying to get you on for a little while, and we finally managed to. So thank you so much for giving up your time today. For those guys that are listening that want to find out more about yourself, more about Aisle 3, where's the best place for them to go and get hold of you and contact you? Yeah,
well, you're welcome to message me directly. You can find me on LinkedIn, Thomas Vosper. You can drop me an email. It's thomas@aisle-3.co. Check out our site. We are at our MVP stage. We've launched across a bunch of categories, but are focused on footwear and trainers right now. So next time you are looking for a pair of trainers, please visit aisle-3.co. Have a look and message me directly. Let me know what you think.
Lovely. Well, thanks, Thomas. It's been a blast. I look forward to catching up with you again. We'll probably I think we'll get you back on in 6 months, and we'll have an update on the journey. Fantastic.
Maybe we can do that one over. Maybe we can do that one over a beer if we're lucky.
I hope so. I bloody hope so.